This is the fasting mistake that almost took me down. It almost destroyed me. And it almost made me throw in the towel with fasting. Okay, now, I've mentioned before that when I was fasting a lot, I was always kind of run down. I would get sick, I would not have energy, and I always attributed it to just not eating enough. And that definitely played a role. But even after I adjusted that, I was still having issues. And one of the things that I've always paid so much attention to, but I seem to neglect when I was fasting a lot, was what happens to my gut when I fast. What is happening to the actual gut health? And we always look at just the microbiome, but the big fasting mistake that I made is not realizing that fasting actually degrades the gut mucosal layer. Yes, you're hearing that from someone that is a fan of fasting. It degrades the gut mucosal layer. And I'll explain how we can correct it, what I now do differently, and how we can avoid this from happening, but also the why so we can kind of navigate it better. I put a link down below for 50% off Create's creatine stick packs. These are stick packs that are sweetened with monk fruit. So it's just 5 grams of creatine monohydrate in the Creapure patented form, along with monk fruit. You can put it in a water bottle, you can put it in a jug. I sip on it throughout the course of the day. Even when I'm fasting, I find that creatine is one of the most important things to maintaining brain energy and just giving me that vitality that I want throughout the day, whether I'm fasting or not. I find sipping on it throughout the day is highly effective, especially compared to just taking one big bolus of it throughout the day. I have about 5 to 15 grams per day, depending on how my training is, what my mental load is. Anyway, that link down below is for 50% off these delicious tasting stick packs sweetened with monk fruit. So down below in the top line of the description. So there's some really cool evidence that was just published in the journal Nutrients on how we can combat some of the gut mucosal breakdown and the gut barrier integrity issues. We'll talk about that in a second. Let me briefly explain what happens when you're fasting. When you fast, it is actually normal for your gut mucosal layer to break down. Okay, so it thins out, and what happens is the first meal that you eat becomes very important because the first meal that you eat ends up being either healing or actually damaging to the gut. Okay, especially if you're fasting longer than like 18 hours, that gut mucosal layer just thins and thins and thins. You actually have a good degree of gut repair that happens during that time, but what happens is the mucosal layer shrinks for some of that repair to occur. It's kind of wild. So what you want to do is, of course, the first thing that you have, or at least as a general rule, is you want to support that gut mucosal layer. We'll talk about that. But this study that was published in Nutrients took a look at athletes that had really damaged guts. Now, athletes commonly get damaged guts because their antioxidant abilities decrease, they're stressed, they're overloaded. But it mimics a lot of what happens when someone is stressed, someone is sleep deprived, or someone is coming off of a long fast, right? So you get this gut barrier degradation, like the permeability increases. So you can have shards of material and food get into your bloodstream that triggers a chronic inflammatory response. You ever notice when you're fasting, sometimes if you don't eat right after you break a fast, you feel extra achy and extra inflamed? There's something to do with it. It's lipopolysaccharides. Anyway, this study looked at these athletes that had poor gut health, and they looked at their zonulin levels, which are proteins that regulate the tight junction of the gut. They looked at occludin, which is another tight junction protein, TJ protein, and then they looked at LPS, okay, lipopolysaccharides. These are actually crossed through the gut and actually cause the inflammation itself. So what they found is that these athletes had high levels of these LPS and low levels of junction proteins because their guts were weak. They gave them either a control with nothing or 85% dark chocolate every day for 30 days. And after 30 days, it repaired their gut. Their gut permeability decreased, their gut intestinal barrier improved and came back to baseline. And then there was a separate arm of the study that did an in vitro study that found that the polyphenols and the epicatechins in chocolate itself actually increased or improved the gut damage. It fixed the gut damage. So what does this mean for people that fast, and what have I learned from it? What I have learned is that chocolate, first of all, dark chocolate, is a staple in my fasting days after I break my fast. Not the first thing, but it's something that's in the diet, okay? It's going to help support and help potentially repair the gut barrier that gets damaged. So think of it as damage control. You're consuming this dark chocolate because the polyphenols and the straight epicatechin, the flavonoids, can help repair the gut. They can help initiate some of the repair. But what good is repair if you don't actually provide the tools to actually do the building itself? It's like having the workers without the tools. So now what I do is when I break my fast, I either have bone broth, which I've talked about before, or I'll have collagen in glutamine. And I used to not like glutamine. I don't like glutamine for muscle building. I think it's a complete hoax. I do not think it works. Glutamine for muscle building is a hoax. People have concerns with glutamine because some, I can't even say the word on YouTube, some types of cells can grow with glutamine, okay? But that's fairly esoteric, and most people would actually get benefit from having more glutamine in their diet, whether it's from their diet or from a supplement. So I will take collagen for sure. Oftentimes I'll add glutamine if I am extra stressed or I worked out extra hard that day because you deplete it very fast. That's why endurance athletes use it a lot of times, because they get depleted and their gut mucosal layer breaks down, their intestinal permeability increases, and what do they end up with? Chronic inflammation. So what was happening to me with fasting? My joints were hurting. My brain was foggy after I would break my fast. I wasn't recovering. I felt inflamed even though my body was lean and I looked good. Wild, huh? You're dealing with chronic inflammation because gut health. And we forget about it because we're focusing so much on the metabolic piece. I'm metabolically healthy, my mitochondria is healthy, my energy manufacturing is healthy, but you're forgetting that the one simple veil that protects you from negative aspects of your like lipopolysaccharides and pathogenic material has been pierced. So now these things are getting into the bloodstream and it triggers an immune response. If your immune system is constantly working on these things, what's going to happen if you have a pathogen come in? What's going to happen if you're stressed? What's going to happen? You're going to contract it, right? It's a very obvious situation when you look at it like that, but you have to take this big back seat and say, oh, it's my gut that's causing an issue. How do I repair it? So just to recap here, fasting does degrade your gut, but fasting is also good for the gut because that's when the repair help starts, right? So you have to fast to help a little bit, okay? Polyphenols from chocolate added into the diet seem to have a profound impact on repairing the gut. Why? Probably just from the epicatechin and the flavonoids. Could you get those other places? Possibly, but chocolate seems to be very potent. Collagen, bone broth, protein in general, ground beef, and 5 grams of glutamine. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.